Hey folks, this is Kalani. I want to talk to you a little bit more about Guild Wars 2 in this Let's Talk Guild Wars 2. I want to talk about the Zerker issue, quotation marks, as well as little bits to do with the Holy Trinity and why we don't have it. So the Zerker issue is quite a hot topic right now, in that a lot of things are being thrown around on various forums, various thread websites, and there seems to be quite a bit of confusion, or rather quite a bit of confusion about what it either is or why it's a problem. Now, first things first, the Zerker issue, quotations, are what people are referring to with practically everybody running berserker gear, straight berserker gear, that's power, precision and crit damage, or soon to be ferocity, but we'll talk about that a little later. Basically because it is the most optimal or most efficient gear to complete whatever you require in Guild Wars 2. Now, I'll get into the reasons why, but there should be no debate on that. Berserker gear is the most efficient gear to completing any task in Guild Wars 2, which is a problem. Now, the main problem, or rather the first problem, is because Guild Wars 2 was always advertised as a game which you can play how you want to play. That was their ideal, that was their model of gameplay. Play how you want to play. The problem with that is that with Berserker gear being the quotations best gear, for PvE at least, anybody who from there that wants to be optimal or efficient has to run Berserker gear. There's no question about that. If they want to kill things the fastest, if they want to get their rewards the fastest, and if they want to be kind of the popular pick, shall we say, for any pug dungeon group, any pug farming group, pretty much anything pug-wise, you'll need to be running Berserker gear. Which is obviously a problem if you don't want to run Berserker gear, because if you don't want to run Berserker gear, and you want to do a dungeon, but the people who want to do that dungeon want you to be in Berserker gear, you either have to play how you don't want to play, or not do that dungeon with those people. Now, I know what you might say, pugs are pugs, and if you want to run dungeons smoothly with whatever you've got, go for a guild. That's all fine and dandy, except a new player coming to the game suddenly sees a group of players he wants to play with, because he wants to do that dungeon. You know, this guy's new, he hasn't got himself a guild yet, and they refuse to take him because he's not wearing a certain set of gear? That's probably not going to sit too nicely, and is a very bad first impression for anybody coming to Guild Wars 2. Now, the other side of that is that somebody running full Berserker gear is most likely going to overpower any content they come across, simply because the play how you want to play model or ideal states that you must be able to kill that creature, that monster, you must be able to do this task with this different set, with a less damage oriented set, meaning that your damage is always going to be higher than what the game or what the content has to be balanced for, which again is a little bit of a problem. I mean, some people might like to overpower things, but unless you come across a genuine challenge, you may not like it. I don't know. I guess that one's a little subjective. And as I say, anyone who's not running Zerker gear is then potentially under pressure to run Zerker gear simply to be more optimal or more efficient in what they're doing. So, I mean, you may get bored if you're running Zerker gear, and you may be under pressure to run Zerker gear if you're not already running it. That's not a nice place to be, balance-wise, if your model is to play how you want. Now, it's kind of catch-22 though, because at the end of the day, if you're in Berserker gear, you're killing things faster and getting rewards faster. So, I mean, there's every reason to run Berserker gear, and there's not many reasons not to. Unless you want to survive a bit longer, but we'll get into that just now, because when you think about stat weighting, or rather, the value, I guess you could say, of certain stats, power, precision and crit damage all stack together ridiculously, and the more power you have, the more precision is worth. The more precision you have, the more crit damage is worth. The more crit damage you have, the more power is worth. It's just, they all complement each other perfectly, and they're all on the same piece of gear. It really is ridiculous. But to talk about some other stats, Vitality doesn't really do anything for you at all. I mean, it increases your maximum health. The problem with that is that when that health is gone, that Vitality stat is doing nothing. Vitality only helps you when you're at full health, and that's not going to be a great deal of the time. Now, on the flip side of survival, you've got Toughness. Toughness actually scales really well and works really well. If you look at a build which focuses on toughness and less damage compared to a damage build with less toughness, they actually do shape up pretty nicely in that you'll probably, say if you cut your damage in half, you will most likely survive twice as long if you're swapping those stats from damage into toughness and potentially healing power. You will survive, give or take, about the same amount of time, so you will take the same amount of damage for when that mob then dies. Give or take. It's a little sketchy on the maths, and it's a bit difficult to calculate sometimes because we can't calculate proper DPS or accurately calculate proper DPS without it being simulated, and then that's kind of the ideal situation, which we won't get into that, but it's difficult to calculate, let's say. The problem is that, well, you might say, alright, fair enough, so I can survive twice as long and it'd take twice as long to kill it. Or I can do double the damage, kill it quicker, but I'll take more damage. Yeah, something like that. Except you'll kill it faster, meaning that you'll take less damage overall, but you'll take higher increments of damage, if that makes any sense. So you might end up taking the same amount of damage, but kill it twice as fast, which is actually more beneficial to the berserker stat, because it's more efficient. There's time involved, so it's more efficient. But the stat weightings are pretty equal. The main problem, and the biggest problem I have to say, comes when you include active mitigation or active defense, which is basically the ability to avoid any and all damage through a variety of skills and abilities, such as the warrior's immunity. You can have the mist form immunity, you can have all that good stuff, but the ones that I want to talk about more are things like dodge rolls, which everybody has access to. Everybody, which is, let's just call it what it is. It's an immunity to damage for those, I think it's like half a second, but if you time it right, you can avoid practically any damage, which is actually quite dangerous for game design. But the other thing is Aegis. Because Aegis, again, you don't even have to time it. If a Guardian pops Aegis on you, you're blocking the next attack. And if you block the next attack, it's not doing damage to you. I mean, you might think, yes, so, I don't fully understand. The problem is that the game isn't, or rather the stat weightings aren't balanced around active mitigation. If you have a full DPS spec and enough active mitigation to not take any damage at all, you're going to kill the mob twice as fast and take no damage. Whereas, if you're running a slightly tougher build, you're going to take less damage, but your active mitigation might actually run out. You might not have enough active mitigation to kill the mob to take no damage, because your damage is lower. If that makes sense. So, I've got enough damage to 3-shot a mob. Now, this mob is going to kill me in 5 hits itself, except I've got something which makes me immune for those 3 seconds. So, the 3 seconds it takes me to kill it with however many hits, I take no damage simply because I've got an ability which tells me I take no damage. Whereas, the other side of things, it's going to take me 6 seconds to kill it, but I only have something which makes me immune for 3 seconds. So for those other 3 seconds, I'm going to take damage. Now, regardless of how little damage I take, I've still taken more damage than if I was in the DPS spec or the damage spec, where I took no damage because the immunity completely covered it. When you take that a bit further and look at some boss mechanics, you're looking at things like a huge AoE attacks which are supposed to down you. You're looking at huge targeted attacks which are supposed to down you. You can either block them with Aegis, or you can dodge roll them. You can go immune for them, you can go mist form for them, all that good stuff. But everybody has access to dodge, and if you've got a Guardian in your group, they can Aegis the entire group. So you take no damage. But you're still running a full damage spec, which means that boss is going to die twice as fast, meaning it's going to get less of those huge attacks off, meaning you have to block less of those attacks, meaning the damage spec with active mitigation is actually far superior to the toughness spec. Which is a little problem. Just a little problem. But it's kind of interesting, because this kind of game design, where the bosses have to have all their damage in very telegraphed, very obvious and very big attacks, comes around because we don't have the Holy Trinity. I mean, if you look at any game with a tank, healer and damage Holy Trinity, the tank takes the damage, the healer heals the damage, and the DPS go for the damage on the boss. Why this is a problem is because if you're running 5 Zerkers, which, by the way, play how you want to play, means the game has to be balanced around having no toughness in your group, no healing in your group. Everyone's got their own stuff, everyone can heal themselves, everyone basically is able to dodge all the damage because that's how the game is designed. That active mitigation, that active control and combat, you need to be able to basically survive whatever the game throws at you, because you're playing how you want to play. So these bosses cannot kill you unless that attack is telegraphed. Unless you can avoid the damage, if there is a way to avoid the damage, that boss can't kill you. They can whack on you, which you may note any normal attacks are pretty small compared to their large telegraphed attacks. You're kind of in a situation where if you don't dodge at the right time, you're going to die. But you can dodge it, and that's what's going to kill you. So, you know the boss fight, everybody knows the boss fight, everyone dodges at the right time, no one takes any damage, no one dies, and because you're all running a high damage spec, you down that boss before he can get several of these attacks off, meaning you killed that boss a lot quicker than if you were running toughness specs. But if there was a tank in there and a healer in there, then that boss would be able to do heavy damage to either all the group, but not enough to kill them, obviously, and heavy damage to the tank as well, whenever he wants, with every swing, because the healer is supposed to take care of the tank is going to have abilities to reduce the damage he takes, and the healer can keep everybody happily healthy, while the DPS focus on the damage on the boss. So, because we don't have the Holy Trinity, we have to rely on an active mitigation system to stay alive. With an active mitigation system to stay alive, we don't need the inherent toughness, we don't need the passive toughness, we don't need the passive defense, we don't need those stats. So we go for more damage. We go for more damage, that means we kill the boss faster, meaning we actually need less active mitigation to stay alive, if you're following that properly. So, either which way, due to the game's design decisions ArenaNet made to go forward with Guild Wars, Berserker is going to stay, and I don't see it going anywhere anytime soon, and I don't honestly see a way to fix this, or a way to change this. Yes, you can have a variety of things which, for example, there was a brilliant one on the forums where someone suggested that aggro, or the boss's focus, goes onto the person doing the least damage, so that that person is discouraged either from building full tank or full damage. They'll either build toughness because they see they're getting the aggro of the boss, or they'll build more damage so they don't get the aggro of the boss. So they're rewarded either which way they go. The problem with that is it makes no sense. Logically, why would something want to kill someone who's doing the least damage to them? But, I mean, you're talking about logic in a game, and that's probably not the best thing to do. But that is one actual really good suggestion to how to fix it, although I don't think that would work all too well. And either which way, that then leads into the you've got to either have a tank or full damage. It's like if you've got one person with a toughness build, they're going to have to go full toughness or full damage, because if they've got a little bit more toughness than the people doing damage, they're going to get the focus of the boss. And if that means that the boss is then doing hefty damage to them because they changed the way bosses work and they want this kind of interaction where one person is taking the damage, then they're going to die because they only got that smidgen more toughness. Whereas if they're in full tank, full toughness, they would be taking a lot less damage, but depends if they want to do that. I mean, it's a really difficult thing to balance, and I really do think this is the reason why a lot of PvE content is either lacking or incredibly tuned. For example, Tequatl is not a difficult fight, but it does require you to be on the ball. You need to know exactly what you're doing, and I'll be honest, for Tequatl, you're better off running berserker gear. Or that's kind of different actually, because you cannot crit Tequatl, so precision and crit damage is kind of worthless. You're better off running soldier's gear, interestingly enough. But either way, you need the power. It's like if you didn't have the power there, you wouldn't be able to do anything with it, meaning that damage is still king wherever you go. I mean, it completely depends on how you want it. I think they've done a brilliant job of balancing it in Guild Wars 2. I really, really do. The content is still fun. I mean, that's the main point of Guild Wars. If it wasn't, then we'd see raids and we'd see horrible vertical progression, where essentially you replace your gear every 2 weeks, by the looks of things, with Guild Wars 2. But I don't know, it's an interesting thing to think about. It really is. I mean, when you start going down a little deeper and deeper and looking at the game's design decisions that ArenaNet made and how it led to this, it definitely becomes something interesting to look at. But what do you guys think? I mean, remember, this is just me throwing my ideas. This is just literally me talking out loud, or rather, thinking out loud. It'd be pretty useless if I couldn't talk out loud, but those are my thoughts on it. I don't really think it's that much of an issue. I don't really think they have to change anything greatly. The main issue is how people perceive it. I mean, I do not care if we have someone running full knights. I don't care what people are running on their gear, as long as they're having fun, as long as we get the boss down, as long as we get the loot. I really couldn't care less what class we have and what their gear is. I mean, I personally will always run berserker gear because I love to see the damage. But that's just me. What do you guys think? Is the Zerker issue, quotations, really an issue? Would you prefer a Holy Trinity, now that Guild Wars has been out for a while? Would you prefer that concept of tanks, DPS and healers? And would you prefer a class to have a lot more of those very typical supporty, healy skills? I don't know, what would you guys like to see to either resolve this issue or kind of lessen it, I guess, if it is an issue to you guys? And if it's not, why do you think that way? Leave us all your good we nearly went the entire video, but never mind. All your comments, suggestions and theories, leave them all in the comment section below, and we can have a good old discussion. Remember, that's what these videos are for. Discussion, discussion and discussion. The others have been pretty good at this, and I wonder how this one will be received. So, that's all I really have to say on the matter, unless I've forgotten something obvious. But never mind. If I have, I'm sure someone will bring it up. Thanks for watching, folks. Good luck and have fun, and as always, I will see you next time.